Welcome to this edition of Valor Media. This is episode number 80 for August 16th, 2021, and I'm your host, Mark Appenzeller. Today we are kicking off what will actually be a three-part series. They'll be spread out a little bit, but three separate installments that are focusing on a lot of different concepts related to one specific topic. Now, this series falls into the Valor XL portion of our podcast, which is where we share strategies with you to help you thrive in business. And I always give the little precursor in those Valor XL episodes by saying that the concepts we share, we really do try to present in a way that gives them a certain universality. Because no matter what your business is, no matter where you go and apply your efforts, your time, your talents, you can usually take the concepts that we provide and find some relevant connection for them. And that's the same with what I'm going to be presenting in this three-part series. But what makes this one a little bit different is that I'm specifically tailoring it to a very unique group of individuals, and that is folks who work for nonprofits. Now, maybe you've never really had any connection with a nonprofit, and until you've spent years in that world, it can be a little bit difficult to really understand that nonprofits have an extremely specific set of challenges that they face. And I think that's irrespective of their size or even how much money they have to play with. When you're approaching things from the dimension of the nonprofit, everything has a completely different perspective to it. Now, even saying nonprofit can be a little bit tricky. What do we mean by a nonprofit? I think for a lot of people, when you mention a nonprofit, they tend to think of something that kind of falls into the social services category, like Valor Ministries. We are a nonprofit, and we're very much about serving people who are in need, helping people who are in crisis. That's not all nonprofits. There are many nonprofits that might be still community-based and civic-minded, but it can address a wide variety of needs that aren't necessarily specific to some of the same things that Valor deals with. And yet I still think wherever you fall in that huge equation of nonprofit, you kind of come under some similar challenges that get dropped into your path. And sometimes you may not even notice that they're there until you're really confronted with them. And that's why I'm calling this three-part series Boulders. So today is Boulders Part 1. Now I want to specifically talk about a couple of different elements of the nonprofit experience as we move through some of the later episodes here. But in this first installment, I really want to talk initially about this idea of boulders. What do I mean by that, and how does that apply in the nonprofit world? Now for me, I've been part of Valor Ministries since I came here in June of 2014 as a volunteer. About 6 months later, I was hired on staff, and I've been here ever since. I've moved through a variety of positions, and today I'm the operations manager of the Valor Crisis and Training Center. Now, in that long and winding road from there to here, I've experienced a lot. I've worked with a lot of colleagues and gone through a lot of situations where we had to do some extremely creative problem solving to figure out how to really make things work. And so part of what I want to share with you is born out of those experiences. And for me, it all starts with this idea of boulders. I think there are many nonprofits that tend to be more on the small side. There are certainly many nonprofits who receive huge grants or endowments or donations. But I think for a lot, it's more an issue of trying to deal with maybe less funds than you would like, a smaller staff than you really need. And those are the kinds of things that can be extremely daunting if you don't really have the proper mental perspective moving into whatever it is in the pursuit of not just the mission, the day-to-day things that you're trying to carry out, but ultimately the vision. Somebody started your nonprofit. It was put out there for probably the purpose of serving others, or it would be a for-profit. And in that service aspect, sometimes there's a very lofty goal, a very noble aspiration that is incredibly important and that is driving everything under it. But as things play out, there can be a really weird disconnect that happens between the initial inspiration of somebody wanting to do something to serve others and the nuts and bolts of really carrying that out in day-to-day operations. The things I want to share with you will hopefully frame that in a way that makes sense. And I want to talk about this idea of boulders. Now, I live in Western Maryland, and the area that I live in is full of rocks. There is so much limestone throughout this particular county. Whenever you go to dig even a very shallow hole or trench, you are bound to hit rock. Back about 30 years ago, I helped to build a church, and we worked on it through an extremely snowy winter. And everything that we did, everything that was excavated and uncovered on that building site led people to jokingly say that it was the church built on the rock, because there was limestone everywhere. Even if you're not hitting a massive rock, you are going to hit rock. And so anything that gets built involves moving rocks. And every morning when I'm driving to work, I drive through some beautiful farmland, extremely hilly back roads. And one of the things that really fascinates me and is extremely apparent once fall rolls around and the leaves are off the trees is a sight that to me is kind of inspirational, even though I've seen it so many different times. It's something I'll glimpse out the window as I'm coming over a hill or rounding a bend. And there are different places on my drive to work where I can look out over farmland. And like I said, especially in the fall when there's less vegetation, you will see sometimes way out in the middle of a cornfield, there will be a place where there may be a tree or two growing, but there will be a gigantic pile of boulders. And they're just out there in the middle of the field. And it almost looks like it's the ruins of something that might have been built there long ago. And I'm talking a lot of boulders and big rocks. And they've been piled there so long in many of these cases that trees have grown up in the midst of them. Well, what's really fascinating to stop and think about is that in many cases, these boulders have probably been laying there since the 1800s. In the county where I live, there are a lot of old farms, farmland that has been in families' possession for generation after generation. And so when you see something like that, these heaps of stone out in the middle of the field, you're looking at something that, first of all, is an amazing testimony to the incredible hard work and perseverance of those farmers so long ago. I picture somebody, let's say circa 1850, who maybe has purchased this land. They want to come in there and farm, but before they can plow and cultivate and seed, they are confronted with the fact that everywhere they turn, when they break the soil, they're hitting some boulder, some big rock. So the only solution was they had to remove those boulders before they could till the soil. And I can't even imagine the exhausting, back-breaking labor, probably having teams of horses dragging those rocks. To see some of these piles of stone that are so far back in a field is mind-blowing. I can't even comprehend the amount of effort it would take just to do that, let alone to then turn around, build a barn, and cultivate all of this farmland and go through the endless chores of maintaining that. And the reality there is that that was something that those people had to do to farm that land. And it wasn't simply, well, let's come in and farm. Before they could do anything, they had to deal with the boulders. And even though those original farmers are no longer here, somebody is still getting fruit from that ground. Well, that really speaks to me, because I think in the world of nonprofits, there's an incredible valuable lesson there to be gleaned. And it's the fact that we need to pull the boulders out of our path. The boulders are there, but for some reason, we tend to get so caught up in the enthusiasm of pursuing whatever our mission is that the boulders become invisible to us. We come into whatever our field is, and we have this great vision, this great passion. We want to do something that's going to bless and enrich the lives of others. And sometimes we run so much with that enthusiasm that we don't notice all the boulders. We think we'll just come in and do this, this, and this. And then when we start to chip into the soil, we realize, wow, there are some things in our way. I have, at different times in my life, had the experience of being connected with situations where people have a great idea, a real heart of compassion to help others, but they get so caught up in that they kind of get what I call gushy. They're so wrapped up in the emotions, they're so wrapped up in the vision, and they lose the practical application of recognizing what it will take for them to move forward in the pursuit of whatever it is that they're trying to do. There's a lot to look at there. One of the biggest things is that you really do have to have structure if you are putting together a nonprofit venture. And it doesn't really matter what you're doing. It doesn't have to be social services oriented. It can be anything that falls into that realm of nonprofit. But again, sometimes I think folks get carried away with their own enthusiasm, and they somehow feel that the passion is all they need. They put so much emphasis on the passionate pursuit of their goal that they almost feel if they start thinking about nuts and bolts and day-to-day stuff, it's somehow stealing the grandeur of whatever it is that they're in pursuit of. I want to encourage you to be really aware of that because, again, having been at Valor for all these years, I've seen us overcome tremendous challenges. We've had to navigate through so many twists and turns and figure out so many different things that we probably wouldn't have had we been a for-profit venture. It's really instilled something in me. It's the realization that if you have a cohesive team of people who are operating, and here's the kicker, in a clearly defined structure, you can overcome anything. The problem is, a lot of times I think nonprofits miss that idea of a clearly defined structure. I think even though they may go through everything they need to do to be compliant with taxes and regulations and local municipal codes, they miss that idea of structuring what they're actually doing. Now, there are some great organizations to assist nonprofits, like the National Council of Nonprofits, but it really comes down to the individual organization to figure out what it's going to take to bring about what they're trying to accomplish. And as we go a little bit further in this series, that's kind of what I want to really instill in your mind so that it can flavor your perspective as you look at whatever goes on if you are part of a nonprofit. Nonprofits, like I said, are kind of all over the spectrum, but it really does come down to recognizing that the passionate pursuit will never be enough. And I've seen so many well-intentioned people come into a venture convinced that I know what I need to do, and they never get there because they forgot there are probably boulders in their path. I say boulders because when we initially look at the things we have to figure out, they can seem overwhelming and devastatingly huge. Because the first boulder that lays in your path is the big one. It's getting a clearly defined structure. Once you start getting that ball rolling, everything will fall into place. It won't happen overnight, and it won't be easy, but you can do it. And maybe you're at a place in whatever organization you're part of where you recognize that you need to address some of those obstacles. When you're in the middle of that, it can be almost impossible to really get a clear perspective on what the problem even is. Sometimes you can't see the trees for the forest, and it just becomes more and more frustration and confusion. You know something's wrong, but you can't figure out what it is, and you certainly can't figure out what to do about it. If you find yourself in a situation like that in your organization, your nonprofit, Valor can help. Like I said before, we didn't go through all of this to simply say, well, we made it out on the other side. I think everything that we've experienced has been so that we can bring that experience to others. And the Valor XL portion of Valor Ministries is really dedicated and committed to that. We have developed a lot of expertise in the area of figuring out how to navigate some of these very challenging twists and turns. And we'd like to be able to bring that to you so that you can gain from our experience and our insight and find your own solutions. We can't come in and fix your problems. Only you can do that. But we can give you incredibly impactful resources to set you on the right course. You can reach out to us at info@valorxl.com, and someone from our team will get back in touch with you. We'll ask you some key questions to help you get a clear perspective of where your organization or nonprofit finds itself. We have a tool called Taking Your Organization's Temperature that can give you an incredible insight into the health of the organization that you're a part of. When you're trying to overcome organizational challenges, I think one of the worst things is feeling like you're doing it alone. Trust me, you don't have to. Valor XL is here to help. If you have suggestions for topics that you think would be beneficial for us to discuss in any future installment of the Valor Media podcast, please reach out to us at media@thevalorcenter.org. I encourage you to learn more about what Valor XL can do for your organization by visiting us on Facebook at Valor XL or our website www.valorxl.com. I also suggest that you get a background on the overall vision and mission of Valor Ministries on Facebook at Valor Ministries and our website www.thevalorcenter.org. If you are part of a nonprofit, chances are pretty good funding is a struggle for you. And for many nonprofits, one of the most critical things they have to pursue is grants. If the whole prospect of writing a grant is overwhelming to you, we have a fantastic resource, the Face Your Fears Grants Writing course that was developed by Valor's Executive Director, Lori Riston. It's an incredible, comprehensive package that will give you the complete background on what you need to do to write relevant, successful grants for the funding of your organization or nonprofit. You can check it out on www.valorxl.com/training. Please like and subscribe to the Valor Media podcast. We publish a new episode every Monday. Some of our installments in this Valor XL series addressing thriving in business, and others in our Crisis to Thriving series, where we share strategies to move you in your personal life from crisis to thriving. If you benefit from the Valor Media podcast, would you consider benefiting us? Would you financially support us so that we can continue to bring you new content? If so, you can make your tax-deductible donation securely online by visiting www.thevalorcenter.org and clicking on the Donate button. Or you can send a check or money order to Valor Ministries, 324 East Antietam Street, Suite 104, Hagerstown, Maryland, 21740. Thanks again for joining me today. I hope you can come back for installments 2 and 3 in the Boulders series. But please come back next week for Valor Media when your host will be Lori Riston. Until then, remember this: you were made to thrive.